Alrighty, hey guys, Chris back with another top-down review, and today we're talking about Spider-Man Homecoming. So Spider-Man Homecoming is, I believe, the 15th, 16th movie in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Wow, that's a lot. Or maybe 17th. I'll need to fact check, but it's somewhere in there. But anyway, we're with another reboot of Spider-Man, only this one is a little bit younger. He's about 15 years old as opposed to the other Spider-Mans who were, they were older in real life, but they were like more like graduate level Spider-Man movies. He was like sort of like a little bit older, doing his own thing, going out in the real world actually with a job and everything. This one's a little bit more small scale. He's a high school student, he has regular high school problems and all that, and then he just sort of becomes Spider-Man on his own terms and everything. And what I really like about that is that he's challenged in a way. Unlike the other Spider-Man movies that have, like jobs and everything, this one has, like a Spanish test and, homework and all this other stuff. So you really feel like he's challenged more as like a kid as opposed to, an actual man or whatever. Because, that's the Spider-Man that we remembered, the one that has to do an algebra test and at the same time have to save the world. And just the whole idea of Spider-Man is also good because it kind of gives like a reflective view of, what is it like to be a kid in the Avengers world and everything like that, having all these different things like that. Like, I quote this one scene that they do, like you see a bunch of girls surrounded in like a gym class and they're talking about, the fuck game, kill game, and then it's that game that girls play. I can't really explain it, but and then they'll name off the Avengers names and everything, and then you see Captain America in the trailer, going off and telling them, oh, well, you got detention, oh, you did this or anything. But I know a lot of people thought that the trailer really gave off some of the movie, and in a way it gave off elements, but I don't think it really hits the grounding element of the story, and that's just like this coming of age story. Peter Parker is the new kid on the block, essentially. He's not like Iron Man or Captain America or Thor and everything that are like gods or soldiers or billionaires and they just built their way into the Avengers and everything. No, Peter Parker's a kid. He's like you or me or anybody else that's like out here in the world and has to go about finding his way in the world of the Avengers and everything. I think that's a really interesting thought and idea, and I couldn't be more proud of Marvel for tackling this. It's also very sly in its humor and everything that it does. You'll see them make jokes that I never thought that they would ever make in a Marvel movie or anything, but you have to remember, it's high school and everything. Think of this like the little kid brother of any of the Marvel movies. Like you have Iron Man, Thor, Captain America, they're all like the big brothers. Spider-Man's like the little kid on the block, and Tom Holland definitely shows that. He's challenged, like I said before, and he has to find his place in the world, and he goes up against the Vulture. You also see like a slew of other characters in this movie, like little picked in there. You see like Betty Brant, who will be working at the Daily Bugle eventually. You see Liz Allen, who is his love interest in the movie. You see Zendaya, who eventually plays Mary Jane, it seems like. And then you have, the Vulture, Shocker, all these little villains. Vulture's the main one, but then you have all these little villains that are like in there. They're like shown, but you're just like, if you know who they are in the comics by their real names, then you know who they will eventually become. But it's very sly, as opposed to, if you've seen Spider-Man 3 or The Amazing Spider-Man 2, how they were like all crammed there and it was just like, oh, look at this. This one's just like, he's just a regular person like you and me. You don't realize that those people will become villains. If you know the comic lore, then you will realize that they will eventually become villains, but I just thought that I really liked that, how they were able to introduce characters who would eventually become villains, but didn't actually show them off in their villain persona. The Shocker being the exception just because, he's this dude and he basically has like Crossbones' glove and basically he shocks people, and so he calls himself the Shocker or whatever. And then the Vulture, he actually did a really great job. You actually feel like you understand where he's coming from. he says he's a family man. He's doing everything because he lost his job. He was like a dumpster diver of sorts, basically. He took parts from Avengers battles and he stole them. And then Tony Stark's damage control comes in there and they basically take the parts. And so all these guys lost their jobs. So what does the Vulture do? He comes in and he gives these people a purpose. He gives them their jobs back. But he has to do it in secret or else he'll go to jail and everything. And I think that really hits home because it's a little bit of a struggle. It's one of the first villains I think that's really resonated with me as opposed to like Loki or Baron Zemo. And I know Zemo from Civil War gets a lot of hate and everything sometimes, but I think it's a step in the right direction. I think Marvel is finally learning to understand how to work their villains in their movies, and I think that's great. And if they keep it up like this, then they will have well-balanced movies. Because, I mean, we're all there to see the hero, but when you have an opposing force like the Vulture and how you can see his point of view, you can understand where he's coming from, then I think that makes a really, really great movie. So that way you don't feel like you're just rooting for the hero. You also feel like you're sort of understanding where the villain is coming from, which doesn't really make him all villainous. It just makes him like a human. Like people lose their jobs, people don't always go things don't always go certain people's ways, and I think it makes sense that the Vulture was portrayed as just a family man that had to pick up the pieces of his life and basically rebuild them again. And I think that's a really important thing that they touched on. Iron Man, of course, was in this movie, but I think that he didn't really overshadow Spider-Man at all. I mean, he was there when he needed to be. I mean, he was basically, like everyone thought, the Uncle Ben mentor to Spider-Man. He's like the big guy looking out for the little guy and everything. He's acting like a parent. I mean, they have that beautiful scene in the trailer, which doesn't even feel like as emotionally as it was in the actual movie. Like, he literally says to Spider-Man, hey, the adult is talking. You have to listen. And, it feels like a parent talking to Tony Stark. And I love the line that he says, if you're nothing without the suit, then you shouldn't have it. And it's a great line. And it gives more dimension to Tony. It gives more dimension to Spider-Man. It's like a father-son relationship. And it also gives dimension to Tony, who has grown over the course of these movies. That started out as like kind of like how Spider-Man is, a little bit of prankster, on top of the world and everything. He's kind of matured and everything, and it shows growth in Tony, and also it demonstrates that Tony and Howard Stark, his father, also Howard brought Tony up into this relationship. I mean, at one point he even says, "I'm talking like my dad," and it's actually good. It shows that Tony has become more like Howard Stark in many ways over the course of these movies, and I think that's great, tremendous growth. But just to sum it all up here, guys, I mean, I absolutely enjoyed the movie. I don't want to compare it against any of those other Spider-Man movies. I mean, I have deep respect for Sam Raimi's Spider-Man trilogy, with the exception of Spider-Man 3. It was a great idea what they were trying to do, but I think for its time, it crammed too many things in there. But not to say that it wasn't their fault. I mean, they were experimenting, but now we have the Spider-Man. And not to put down Andrew Garfield. I mean, both of them are tremendous actors, Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield, and they brought Spider-Man to the big screen, and I absolutely love them for doing that because they did a great job with the character. And I don't think it's any of their fault. It could have been script problems, director problems, or whatever. But I think we've finally found a Spider-Man that fits with the comics and fits with the actual lore of what we want to see in a Spider-Man movie. And if Marvel keeps it up like this, then we will have an amazing time in Avengers Infinity War, and I think we definitely will. So, I mean, we're basically just, I would say, 2 movies out, and then we're hitting Infinity War. So definitely look out for Thor Ragnarok come November. That's the last one, and then we have Black Panther next year, and then it's the big showdown, Avengers Infinity War. But it's kind of like a nice change of pace, because these next couple movies, it feels like, is going to be like a little bit of a darker tone, a little bit of a sadder tone, because it's sort of like prepping for this ginormous battle, and they keep saying that it will be the culmination of like all these 22 movies apparently that they've made over the course of this year. So I will see you guys in my next review. I'm probably going to be doing War for the Planet of the Apes. So yeah, let me know what you thought about Spider-Man Homecoming. If you want to compare the other ones, that's fine. I don't feel the need to, but I just think right now this is the quintessential comic book Spider-Man that I've always wanted to see on the big screen, and I think Tom Holland has definitely a whole lot of great Spider-Man movies and great Spider-Man moments still to come. So I will see you guys in my next review. Stay awesome and adios.